Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? So now we will start the meeting of Book Reviewer ya to talk about non-fiction books have we read and discuss about it. So for each presenters, there are 4 questions to answer. The first, what book did you read and tell us about it? And number 2, did you like the book? And then 3, what do you like and what do you dislike from the book? And 4, what's your takeaway from the book? Okay, so we can start from, wait, we can start from Mr. Donald, The Thinking Machine by Stephen Witt. Okay, Mr. Donald, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Gusti, for the time. The book that I would like to present, the title is The Thinking Machine by Stephen Witt, and the subtitle of the book is Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, and the World's Most Coveted Microchip. So the book is about NVIDIA. NVIDIA is currently the most valuable company in the world. I just checked before our meeting today. Still the most valuable company in the world by market cap. And this book is about how NVIDIA started and also about the CEO, Jensen Huang. Okay, I read the question. So this book, did you like the book? Yes, of course, I like the book. What do you like and what do you dislike from the book? What I like about the book is it is a first-hand account, meaning not first-hand, but the author interviews all the people featured in the book, especially Jensen Huang. So this is from primary sources, not from secondary sources. That's the thing. And also the author nails it because this book is sometimes a bit technical. And because my background is in computer science, I know whether the author gets it or not. And the author gets it. He explains correctly all the technical stuff. So this is a good book. And because I know that he explains correctly the technical stuff that I also know, I can trust that he explained the other things correctly as well. And it's also very chronological, which is it's quite complete in terms of all the important points in the story of this book. I also want to explain why I chose to read this book because I like to learn about people, especially from different viewpoints that I've never knew, and I never read about Jensen Huang or NVIDIA, and this is now arguably the most important company in the world because if you use AI, you use ChatGPT, Gemini, Cloud, and all other AI, most likely they are powered by NVIDIA chips. That's why this company now becomes the most valuable in the world, even surpassing Apple, Google, and the likes. Actually, there is a quote in the book. There is currently an arm race between AI providers, but there is only one arm dealer. Arm dealer is NVIDIA. So everybody fights for users, but all of them use NVIDIA chips. What do you dislike from the book? This is always a difficult question for me. I never think about what I dislike. I never think about what I like. So I cannot answer this. Number 4, what is your key takeaway from the book? There are many takeaways from the book, so it's difficult to start. Maybe later in the question and answer session, we can dive more into it. But a few that I can think of is that you need to be able to bet in the future. So what happened with NVIDIA is they bet on two technologies. Both of them are technologies that are inferior, considered inferior, and both of them have been out of favor for many years. The first one is parallel computing. This was the first bet by NVIDIA back in the 1990s. Parallel computing was something that is considered a dead end, something that you should not do back in the 1990s because there were many failures before 1990s. And then the second technology is called neural network. Neural network is a computer architecture that simulates the brain. This was also considered a dead end. People who work on neural network were considered as second-class scientists because this just didn't work. But NVIDIA or Jensen bet on these two technologies, and these technologies combined. And the symbiosis becomes the AI revolution that we have today. So the AI revolution is actually the child of two parents. The parents are parallel computing and neural net, and NVIDIA is exactly in the intersection of these two. That's why it explodes. And the other lesson is that you need to keep trusting or believing in your vision. NVIDIA already got all in on this intersection since 2012, but it only explode in 2020 with the launch of ChatGPT. It's in 2020, so 10 years. And before that, not many people talk about AI. We can see ourselves, most people just know about it from ChatGPT and onwards. So for 10 years is not so much, but they kept at it and kept improving until the time come. So it is long-term thinking and long-term bet, and they keep believing in this. And Jensen especially is able to spot the right intersection, which is very rare. If you can have the right bet on just one future technology, that is already powerful, but he is able to make the right bet on two, the intersection of two technologies. That's why it explodes. NVIDIA was just a video game vendor. So initially they only create cards, graphic cards for video games, but now became the most valuable company that is a bit counterintuitive. Not a bit, but very counterintuitive. You cannot imagine usually that a video game company will surpass all the other large companies. It surpassed Exxon, the oil company, surpassed Berkshire, Warren Buffett's company, surpassed Google, surpassed Amazon, and everything else. So those are my key takeaway from the book. Thank you. Now
Okay,
back to Gusti.
it's interesting, yeah. ChatGPT, Gemini, and yeah, things like that. But NVIDIA is only develop ChatGPT, yeah?
No, NVIDIA developed
Oh,
the chips called GPU, graphical processing
Develop the
unit,
what, sorry?
the microchip.
Microchip?
Yeah, so the microchip that runs ChatGPT and all the other models, Gemini.
oh, I see. So all the
Previously, katanya build AI ya.
Yes, they also build AI, but that is not the main thing. The main thing is they build the chip,
The chip.
so the
Oh.
hardware. Yeah,
Is it true that this super microchip only produced in Taiwan and Netherlands?
it's true, but that is not the most important thing because they are only the manufacturer.
Oh, I see, I
So
see.
if I were to take a metaphor, TSMC, the Taiwan company, is just like a contractor who built the house, but
Hmm.
NVIDIA is the architect. They design the chip.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
and TSMC only, yeah.
owner but manufacture somewhere else gitu ya.
Yeah, someone else manufactures it
Ya, oke.
according to the design.
So
Ya.
almost all AI company use the chips from NVIDIA.
All, not almost all, but all.
Oh,
I think, yeah.
oh, including
Yeah,
the
maybe one exception, Google has their own chip, but I think not so powerful. So in AI, there are different tasks. There are different tasks. There is the training task. You train the brain of the AI, and then there is the inference. The inference is when we use it. So when we ask something to ChatGPT, that is called inference, because
Mm,
ChatGPT has been trained. For the training part, everybody that I know of, they use NVIDIA. For the inference part, most of them use NVIDIA and some of them use their own chips. So NVIDIA is very important because their chips power all the training and most of the inference.
they patented the chip.
Yes, of course. So
Mm,
the chip is very precious now, more precious than gold. So the US government banned the export to China, for example. NVIDIA
mm,
cannot export their more advanced chips to China to keep the AI
mm.
leadership in the US.
Neural network, yeah. Neural network like science to what is it to mix the computer can talk and think like human?
Well, neural network is the software. So NVIDIA doesn't make the neural network. NVIDIA
Yeah.
makes the chip, the hardware. Neural network is the software. This
Oh.
software try to mimic our brain. So in
Mm,
neural network, you have the analogy of neuron. Neuron is our brain cell. And then
mhm.
you have the analogy of the synapses. Synapses is the link between neurons. And these are trained. So it is like simulated brain, and this is trained. And
Oh,
this simulated brain is trained and used in NVIDIA chips mostly.
so this is how they make the AI can talk and respond like human. No.
Yes, yes.
Oh yeah.
So the neural network is how the AI behave like human, but the neural network requires very powerful computer to run. That's why they need these super powerful chips.
Hmm.
With our computer, like the one that I use today here, I cannot run any model. It's too slow. So you need super chips, and these are the kind of chip that NVIDIA makes.
Oh, but the other one, parallel.
Oh, parallel computing is
Yeah, what is it?
so the chip that NVIDIA makes can execute many commands altogether. If we take the brain example, in our brain we have different neurons and they often work together. So for example, if we see a photo, there are different cells in our eyes, and different cells in our eyes capture different part of the photo based on the light. But then they have to work in parallel, right? Because these are different cells. They have to work in parallel to combine all of this. Parallel computing is NVIDIA's ability, the chip, to work to make this parallel work. So there are several, you can run several neurons together, you can run several part in parallel, so it's much faster.
What makes they were so what is it? They believe this so much, even though other scientists thinks that this was a dead end for parallel and neural network.
Yeah, that is one of the interesting part of the story. It is not by NVIDIA though, so the breakthrough is by someone else. There is a scientist. So the story is every year there is a competition of how computer can recognize photos or images. This was back in 2009, 2010, 2011. there is a yearly competition. And the competition, of course, they have a score. There is the winner. In 2012, there is a breakthrough. There was a breakthrough because the winner in 2012 crushed all the other competitors. Usually, the winner only win by like 1 point or 2 points, but this time the winner crushed all the others, so much better than the second place. And as it turns out, the winner uses neural network. At that time, neural network is considered a dead end. You cannot make it work, but these scientists prove that it works. And they use NVIDIA chip. And then NVIDIA, the company, looks at this competition and then realize, Jensen Huang realized after seeing the result, wow, as it turns out, my chip can be used to train AI model using neural network. So Jensen sees that, and from that point onward, they bet everything on the company. So the story in the book, Jensen Huang sent an email on Friday evening. Hello everyone. From Monday, our company is no longer a graphics company. Previously, they make graphics for video games, right? Starting Monday, our company is AI company. That was in 2012. So just like that, Friday evening, Jensen declares now we are no longer graphic companies. From Monday, we are AI company in 2012 after seeing the result of this competition.
I see. So the scientists then work for NVIDIA. Yeah?
No, that's another story. The scientists work for Google,
Oh,
and Google actually developed the type of neural network that is used today by ChatGPT and others. It is a specific type of neural network called a transformer. So there are different types of neural network. The type that is winning is called transformer, and Google developed it with the help of these people. But then Google think there is no hope in turning this into commercial product. So Google just shelved it despite developing transformer. So there is a void in the market because Google developed the specific type of the neural network, but do not want to make a product out of it. And in the void came OpenAI. So OpenAI came and made ChatGPT.
Ronald, I have a question.
Yes,
Lu,
yeah.
yes,
Is
please.
the book focusing on the company or the founder slash CEO?
Sorry, is the book what?
Is the book focusing on the company or the founder slash CEO of NVIDIA?
Focusing on the founder, on Jensen Huang.
Okay. If we can take, for example, three tips how to be as successful as him, what would this tip would be? Maybe we can apply it to our daily lives or something. Or major goal gitu.
Yes, so the first one is he always thinks from the first principles. First principles means he doesn't care about assumptions or other people's thinking about this. He thinks like engineer because Jason Huang is an engineer, electrical engineering. So he considers all this as a engineering problem. He just use first principles. This word came quite often in the book. You have this, so what can you do with it? Regardless what other people say can or cannot. So that is first principles. And secondly, he is a learner because he is an engineer. He is not a good CEO at the beginning. Doesn't know much about business, but he read a lot of books. He read a lot of books. That's the second thing. And the third one is you believe in your vision. So he believe in the vision, though it doesn't happen yet. There are probably many other lessons, but you say three. Okay, that's three.
See. Interesting,
Thank
yeah.
you, Dono.
Okay. Mbak Mita, do you have something to ask for Mr. Donald?
Yeah, Donald, I forgot the name of the founder and or the CEO, that guy with the white hair, what's his name?
Jensen Huang.
Senuang.
Jensen Wong. He came to Indonesia, right?
Yes, he came to everywhere.
Okay, but I mean to Indonesia, to our country especially. So I'm not familiar about the product like the chips, how he changed his company to a company, but I like about his work ethic because I remember that he told us that he starting from the bottom. Yeah, he used to become like a janitor at his job, like a cleaning service. He did all the trivial jobs. Is that correct?
No, he became janitor while at school. So he
Okay.
he was an immigrant and have to come to a boarding school. And in the boarding school, he have to clean some rooms, but not as a job.
Oh, okay. So when he was at school, he did the janitor job, but when he started working, he's already in the office job. He stopped
Yes,
doing all the, okay.
he
But
graduated
did he,
electrical engineering, so as an engineer already.
okay, but it wasn't in this company, right? It was
No,
for another company.
yes, he worked for another company.
Okay. So how long has this company that he founded?
It's
How
founded
long
in
has it been existing?
it's founded in 1992. So now it
Oh.
is what? 8 plus 26, 34 years.
Oh, so it's not a new company, it's an old company. So
Yes.
why wasn't he famous before? Did he suddenly become famous? Is that because of the microchips that he founded, or is that because of the turnaround from like a IT company to become AI company? Which one?
He became famous. So the company only became famous after 30 years, unlike Microsoft, for example, much faster.
Yes,
Because in 2022, there is ChatGPT. So there
yes.
is an AI explosion and everybody use NVIDIA chips. So at that point onward, he became famous.
Oh, okay. So the turning point, why he wasn't famous, why the company wasn't famous, although it's been there for 34 years, is because he was just a regular IT company like the others. But when ChatGPT started, he innovated microchips that have to be used for all the AI. Is that correct?
Yes, but it happened the other way around. So they
Oh,
already make the chips, and then the right
yes.
or the killer application came later, which is AI. So they already make the chip, but do not know what is it for. And as it turns out, the killer application
Ah.
is AI.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So actually, they have innovated the chips before ChatGPT was used.
Exactly. 10
So
years
they,
before.
okay, so they were prepared when nobody was prepared. That's why they became successful.
Exactly. That's why it's also very difficult. Yes.
Oh, so it's not a one day success. They can think ahead. They saw what is coming in the future. They're visionaries.
Yes. So
Uh,
they are already in the right place 10 years before everybody come to that place.
okay. And when he announced that the company changed to AI company, was what year was that?
2012.
Hmm? Huh? So
2012.
they how but the ChatGPT started in 2022, Donald.
Yes, but ChatGPT is the killer application of AI. Before that, there were many simpler AI that we do not
Oh,
know. Yeah, but
could
the
you give an
mainstream,
example?
an example, difficult because all before that, these are not mainstream. So for example, there is AlphaGo, the AI for playing Go or playing chess, but there is no mainstream AI yet. So the AI become mainstream since ChatGPT. Mainstream meaning everybody knows. Before that, there were many AI applications, but they were just niche application, like chess, like for image recognition, but not many people know. So I cannot give an example. because nobody knows about these applications.
Okay, I see. So actually, this guy is really a visionary because when everybody wasn't using AI at all, he already knew that it's going to be an AI era in 10 years. And in 2012, he changed his company to become an AI company. So this
Yes.
is interesting. So my question is, since he's a visionary, what has he said that the future is about? Is he going to change his company to another different kind of company that currently now AI is booming and a killer? Is he going to change again? Did he say something about it?
The book doesn't talk much about the future because the focus is on the history up to the present. But he has many wild ideas. Wild
Okay.
ideas. So, for example, in one part of the book, he talks why not this again. When people ask, the first lesson is first principle. He just doesn't take assumption. For example, this building, why don't you make buildings that can change? So in the morning, the building has this kind of room, and then there are robots, and with the robots, the building will change in the evening. So has these wild ideas, but not all of them become reality. But he is unconstrained in thinking.
Okay, so he's a kind of innovative guy. He thinks out of the box. But buildings are not in his area. I think he's more into IT. But I can see that he can innovate something new, or probably he's already innovating something new that can be a killer in 10 years. Yeah. So I understand.
Actually, the killer that he has already talked, but not in the book, is about robotics. So in the near future, it's
Oh,
about robotics. Yes. The company, it
okay.
is not in the book, but I know from the news, the company is currently working a lot on robotics. So currently the AI is only software that we use,
Yes.
but very soon will be in robots.
Okay, so he's more into robotics using the human form of AI.
Yeah, I think my time is up.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, Donald, for clarifying.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Donald, for your interesting presentation. Yeah, this book is really relatable for this era. Yeah, the booming of AI. Okay, now let's continue to the second presenter of this discussion, the Goddess. Yeah, by Mbak Paramita
Oh, I come
Sastrosari.
first. I thought I'm the last. Can I go the last, please?
Oh, you want to go the last? Okay.
Yeah, because
Augustine
it's
first, and
Yeah.
then me, and then Kak Mita, please.
yeah. I think I'll go the last because it's my book. I need a lot of feedback from you guys.
Mbak Bibit is after me.
Yes, because I just arrived. I need to go to a cafe, and then
Okay,
I'll
okay,
be
okay.
ready.
Okay,
Be
so
careful, Pipit.
I will talk about my about the book I've just read there, The Swordless Samurai by Kitami Masao. This is about like some important historical point of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. So Toyotomi Hideyoshi is like he continued the government of Oda Nobunaga in Sengoku era. So no, Oda Nobunaga was the one that unite Japan, yeah. So like he conquer other landlords and then unify Japan, and Oda Nobunaga wouldn't be successful without the help of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Yeah. So Toyotomi Hideyoshi is actually from non-privileged family. Yeah. He was poor and then he was ugly. It is said that his face was like a monkey. So even though Oda Nobunaga sometimes jokingly called him monkey, yeah, and only call his name when there was a danger, and then thought that they wouldn't meet again. they wouldn't meet anymore. So at that time, actually, the samurai class is by lineage, yeah, by lineage. But Oda Nobunaga, Oda Nobunaga menghargai, what is appreciate a meritocracy. So whoever the person, whatever the family, family background the person have, he give the same, what is it, like the same appreciation for his followers, yeah, including Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And here Toyotomi Hideyoshi, well, before he followed Oda Nobunaga, he worked for other landlord, and he was actually really good that many people jealous of him, and because his landlord then want to, what is it, keep the balance, yeah, keep the harmony. So he although he didn't like it, he then fire Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and then after that he have to survive in the street by selling needles and selling random items. But actually this his experience was the one that makes him become, what is it, familiar with how the merchant works, because many samurai at that time doesn't know how to make a business, but this is something that he mastered because of his low background. And then because he was from unprivileged family, he really know how the ordinary people think, yeah, because at that time many landlord, yeah, many people in higher level, they didn't have any empathy for their followers. So like if there is like a test, they will just comment his followers. And sometimes, and it is often that the comment was so cruel, yeah, cruel and ruthless. But Hideyoshi knows how to motivate them, like he know how to make a relationship with them, he know how to make them happy. So like he motivate them by promising certain appreciation, and then he warned them about the danger if this task didn't was not done, that their family will be crushed by other landlords that can attack their country. And after that he motivate them by making some party, and then giving proper appreciation, material appreciation for the people that has great achievement, like what he did when he was told to build a castle. Yeah, so he worked with all of them, like the previous leader just giving comment ruthlessly and then just threatening them, but Hideyoshi used the time. So he built it just for 3 days, because oh, no, not built, fix, yeah. At first he fixed the fence of the castle. He tried to know his workers, and then he motivate them, he joke with them, and then give them uh, make a party for them, like give them so much food so they have uh, so they have a lot of energy to work. And then after that he motivate them by saying that the fastest group that can finish the job uh, will be given some prizes, yeah, like coins of bronze coins, yeah. And it makes those people become so spirited. Yeah. So did I like the book? Yes, I like the book because you know uh Zero from Hero journey is always interesting, right? Like it is all interesting to know that a person from so ordinary background can do really extraordinary works, and how he was so empathetic towards his surrounding and the people that works with him, and he he what is it willing to sacrifice, like when he wanted to work with other people and the other people rejected, he even though he even said to that people, like that person, I will give you my full salary to you, and the other person was so surprised and then agreed to work with Oda Nobunaga. But actually Toyotomi Hideyoshi was so what is it so scared at that time, because he didn't have any ransom for his own. But luckily then Oda Nobunaga raised his salary uh, to appreciate his successfulness in making that people work for him. But what I dislike from the book, well, I have just I have just learned that uh, Japan history is actually so dark, yeah, not only in the World War era, but long before that, centuries ago. Like, yeah, there almost no daimyo that has the right mind, yeah, even the Toyotomi Hideyoshi. So at first uh, he was pictured as an ideal leader, yeah. He was pictured as an ideal leader, but then after his advisors died, so he have several advisors that accompany him to raise to the top. But after he become the shogun, and then he like there was no one that dare to say no to him because of his power. And because of that, he then become corrupted, and then what is it he tried to attack other country, even though his stepbrother has had already warned him not to do it before he died. But then after that, he tried to attack Korea, and then he tried to attack China, and it wastes so many uh, resources, yeah. And then he gave too much price to his followers. It feels like he tried to buy their loyalty, and then after that, he corrupted, and he even killed one tea ceremony teacher, ya, Rinsu. I forget about the name, just because he wanted to take the just because he wanted to take his daughter as his mistress. Yeah, so like he was good at first and in the middle, but in the end he become corrupted leader. And this is why I dislike from the book. But I think uh even though I dislike about this part, this also what is it makes this book balance, yeah. So like it makes the reader that is has still has a fresh knowledge, have not too many knowledge about Japan history, not to over glorify this person, because this person is only human, like he has a good side but also has a dark side, yeah. What my takeaway from the book? I think it is, yeah, like how to understand people you work with, yeah. Like working with people is a transactional connection, relationship, right? But even though we only what is it our business is just defined by task, by business, do not forget that they are human, and we have to treat them as a human, like know what their ambition, know what they want, know what they fear, and know to try to understand them. And yeah, it will help us to complete our text with them. That's it. The Swordless. Okay. Oh yeah, and the title is The Swordless Samurai because Toyotomi Hideyoshi here didn't have good combat skill. Yeah, what he has is great negotiation skills. That's why the book is titled by The Swordless Samurai, the samurai that can rise to the top without sword. Yeah, he make other people did the job for him. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Gusti, for sharing. So you
Yeah.
just shared that the skill that Toyotomi Hideyoshi has is negotiation skills. Can you give
Yeah.
a few examples of how he used his negotiation skills to rise to the top?
Uh, one of the example is when Oda Nobunaga wanted to recruit a certain figure, like certain advisor that's really wise and have a high skill. Yeah. And he kept rejecting Oda Nobunaga's request to join him. But then after that, Toyotomi Hideyoshi came and then said that he was willing to give all of his salary to this person. Yeah, at that time, the samurai was paid by rice. Yeah, by rice. So like they give like a portion like about hundred kilos of rice, and then uh Toyotomi Hideyoshi willing to give it all to that person, and because of that, that person was like, wow, like I'm uh like my price is this much. Yeah, and so like you really appreciate me. Yeah, like you know my value. Yeah, and after that he agreed to join Oda Nobunaga, even though he thought that Toyotomi Hideyoshi was crazy, something like that. Yeah,
So he was sacrificing his own salary to recruit
yeah,
someone for his master, right? At that
yeah,
time, Nobunaga was his master.
yeah. But after that, luckily Oda Nobunaga raised his salary, so like yeah, he didn't lose it all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question regarding I that is really bad.
But Pipit,
Pipit, you're breaking up.
I cannot hear you.
Maybe turn off the video, Pipit.
How about now?
Yeah.
Can we?
Better,
Yeah.
better.
Okay.
Much
So
better.
the fact that people were afraid of him and almost worship him, is that his fault or is it the people's fault or the followers?
What? The fact that
The fact that people worship him as the leader, is it the Toyotomi Hideyoshi's fault or the followers' fault?
maksudnya people
So
worship him.
yes, so people are, so what I
You know, treat him like God, like afraid of him, things like that. Is it his fault or is it just that's the way people are to their leaders in the past in
Oh,
Japan?
oh yeah. At that time, loyalty is like the number one value ya in samurai era ya. So like they treat their master like higher than their own family.
So that means it's not his fault. It's just the culture. If anyone else occupy his position, he will
Oh,
be treated as same, like God, and everyone is afraid of him.
oh, yeah, but we have to remember. So from the book, I have just learned that at that time, Oda Nobunaga was not at first, yeah, he was not what is it? He was not uh popular daimyo. So like he was a small daimyo in Owari before he unified Japan. But Hideyoshi like saw the potential of Oda Nobunaga and then work his best to serve Oda Nobunaga. Yeah, and yeah, so betrayals is a common things there. So like today you can make your daughter marry other landlord's son, but after that tomorrow you can kill your besan, something like that. So like they can change position, yeah, they can change position really easily at that time.
Okay.
Gusti, okay, so this guy, what was his position again?
Advisors
Advisors to Emperor.
to Oda Nobunaga, shogun. So
What is
shogun
Shogun?
shogun is the one that has military power in ancient
Uh,
Japan. Yeah, so like the emperor is just a symbol.
I didn't know that. This guy, Shogun, has had more power than the Emperor.
Yeah, but to be a shogun, someone must get approval from the emperor.
I see. Do they still have this, the Shogun guy?
No,
And no, they don't anymore.
no. It end in the era apa? Tokugawa shogunate, Tokugawa before Meiji Restoration, before they become what is it? So military, like they come to World War II. Yeah, it already
Uh,
ended. Yeah,
uh,
and it was ended because they make a rule, yeah, like here. The shogun make a rule that his daimyos have to what is it, to live in the capital city yearly, and they need many what is it they have to spend so much money and resources to move their their whole family to the capital city, and they make it like that to keep the daimyos, their apa bawahannya becomes poor, ya, and if they are poor, they cannot have any resources and power to rebel. Yeah, that's why then these people uh, dissatisfied with this kind of rule, so they want to rebel to the shogun.
oh, so the reason why Shogun stopped because they took a lot of power, of money, of resources, and made their subordinates poor.
The reason why the shogun end, why
Yes.
people rebel towards the shogunate.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see. And you were talking about this advisor who gave away all his money to his subordinates, right?
Not subordinates, yeah, more like equal, actually equal. But
Oh,
this person, like Oda Nobunaga want to recruit this person as a higher level follower as well, but he kept rejecting until Toyotomi Hideyoshi offered him with all of his salary.
Okay. So this guy, he keeps rejecting to be promoted, but finally he accepted when Toyota Sang
Toyota.
gave all the salary
Yeah,
to him or to
yeah,
other people to him.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
see.
So Hideyoshi's way of work is like always prioritizing other people. That's how he can rise to the top, and that's why many people becomes loyal to him.
Okay, so he's an advisor to Shogun who
Yeah,
was respected and had many followers who were loyal to him because he didn't think about his money, his salary. He just thinks about how to promote others, yeah,
yeah,
to make others become better, to have better positions
yeah.
rather than himself.
And then
Okay.
these people then finally support him.
Okay, I see. My question is, the World War II, Gusti started after this shogunism ended. Is that a factor also that Japan wanted to become powerful in the world by doing the World War II because the shogunism ended? Was that a factor or not?
No, no, no. After the shogunate era end, there is still Meiji Restoration era. So like there are long gap between the end of shogunate era, between the end of Tokugawa shogunate, and the World War II. And there were so many like long gap between them.
Okay, so there was no relations, yeah, but it's the main.
20 minutes already, guys.
Huh? Pete? I cannot hear you.
I think Mbak Pipit, what Mbak Pipit means is my time is already up.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Gusti.
Okay. So yeah, that's all about the Swordsless Samurai. So now let's continue to Mbak Pipit's book ya, Mummy Mysteries.
Well, can I be heard? I don't know. You know,
You're breaking up, Pipit. I think you need to turn off the picture.
okay, Kak Mita first deh. I will change it, guys.
Yeah, I think you're breaking up because of the video. So in case that I'm breaking up, I'm not gonna present my face. I'm just going to speak. I mean, everybody can hear my voice clearly, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And please take a look at your WhatsApp group, the Book Brewers, because I'm using my tablet and I cannot share screen on my tablet. So I'm using the WhatsApp group to share my book review here. So thank you everybody for helping me to give your input, to ask questions, to edit. Just feel free to do whatever you think is best for my book. This is my fifth book in human development within spirituality genre. And if you see the content here is first chapter, Redefining Beauty and Power. Second chapter, Stories of Remarkable Woman. Third chapter, Becoming Authentic. The fourth chapter is a collection of poems and of lifelong journey. The fifth chapter is the workbook, and the conclusion, the final chapter, is called Destination. And if you take a look at the second picture in the WhatsApp group of book brewers, you will see that the first chapter essence is about to protect, prioritize, and preserve your peace so you can experience love only when you have peace in your life. So what I'm saying that this is a theme of meditation. So one of the divine name that I think is important to emphasize in this stage of my life and also the reader's life is peace. So this chapter is defining what it means by beauty, what it means by power, how that we deviated from the concept of beauty, from inner beauty, beautiful hearts, into physical beauty, the more into fashion, into branded items like Chanel, Dior, are now more emphasized rather than people who is patient, who is perseverant, who is resilient. And also when we talk about power, nowadays power means war, nuclear bombs, military industry, where in this book, I want to say that power comes from knowledge, wisdom, and peace. So that's the chapter 1. And in chapter 2, if you see that the essence of chapter 2 is to remind us that the purpose of humanity is joy and lifting one another up, creating together versus destroying. And I like what Donald said that I'm sorry, I cannot say his name, Johnson Wong or something like that. He's this guy. Yeah, he's creating instead of destroying. So I think that's the second divine name is that we need to create more nowadays because there is so much destructions around us. Yeah, in Gaza, even by natural disasters in Sumatra, in Aceh, and even in Indonesia, in Jakarta, we've seen a lot of what you call that, the politicalizations of the criminalizations of people like Nadima Karim and many others. So those are destroying, which is also a divine name. But I think at this time we need more of creating. One of these example of creating is like Gusti said, Toyota Sang, he promoted people around him. That's one good thing. One of example of uplifting one another up instead of destroying one another. And chapter 3 is about authenticity. I always thought being authentic means to be yourself fearlessly. So to be unique. So it's like to go against the current. It is true. However, sometimes authentic means, in this quote, it means that it's a real strength that is not always loud. Sometimes being authentic is simply waking up each day, facing life quietly, and refusing to give up despite the weight in your heart. Because recently I just saw a podcast of Mel Robbins, I think with Wayne Dyer, one of famous book authors. He says that being authentic actually means that you're consistent. In Islam, we call it istiqomah. That's what authentic is. I just learned. Yeah. So it means that even though that you have a bad day, but you still go to the office. That's authentic. It means that even though you're sad, you still teach your students at school. It means that even though I'm tired, I still write my books and get it done and self-publishing it and have a book launch party. Maybe it's later than it's planned, but still get it done. That's what is authentic because it means every year I get one book launch. Okay, so that's what I learned. Even though that I'm tired right now, mentally and physically, yeah, to be honest. And then on chapter 4, I express my feelings, the anger, the sadness in poems. This is just one of the poem that I wrote, Light and Darkness, pain, anger, distrust, a cry that shatters silence, a scream that echoes into despair. Only darkness I saw, Why God? Why me? Why this? Yet, within the night, a flicker of fragile trembling, hope, laughter, tattoos etched like memories, love's embrace, bodies entwined, a scream of release, an echo of life, a gleam of night I felt. And in that moment, God whispered, not with thunder, but with quiet certainty. Why not? And for your information, I used AI Copilot to edit and also Gemini. Yeah, so because I think that's the best thing about AI, it helps me to become a better writer. So the next one, if you see the next chapter, is because I'm a certified life coach. So I include a workbook that I usually use for coaching my clients. For example, I ask a lot of self-rediscovery questions here. What are you drawn to give to the world? Why? Because I think when you want the gift, you need something that is easy and you are drawn to. Like, for example, it's easy for me to be in book brewers and bookaholics. Yeah, because I like reading books and I like writing books. So what specifically are you focusing on? The reason why I asked this question, because what we focus expands. And the other day I saw Mary Rihanna Instagram. It's so funny. He asked a person to count, I think, marbles. Some marbles are brown, others are pink. And after he counted it, Mary Rihanna asked him to throw them onto the table and then put them into one box. And then she asked him to put the brown marbles into a different box, box A, and the pink marbles into the box B. And these guys just did it randomly. And after 15 seconds, this guy could not finish it. But when he redid it, Mary Rihanna gave a specific instruction. Now, put just the brown marbles first. So these guys put the brown marbles into box A. He didn't think about the pink marbles. And what happened? These guys got both marbles, the brown ones, done in a third of the 15, like 5 seconds. And then he could have done the pink marbles too in 5 seconds, so less than 50 seconds. So when you focus, you get things done easily and faster. So focus is very important. That's why that's one thing that I want my readers to ask themselves, what specifically are you focusing on? And at the end is the final chapter. Yeah, and if you see that I highlighted the conclusion here in my final chapter, I already sent you the opening chapter a month ago, but here I'm including the final chapter. Let me read this for you. What matters most is, after all the things I've done, that I have loved along the way. Love is not about finding someone flawless. Love is about finding someone who chooses you every single day, not only in your light, but in your darkest hours too. Real love stays, understands, and grows alongside you. And when it is right, you will never have to beg. And underneath, also highlighted, I wrote a single truth: the courage to love and the wisdom to know. I have been brave to love unconditionally, and I have been wise to experience life fully. Love, she realizes, is not a fleeting gift. It is the essence of being, the truth that endures beyond space and beyond time itself. Do your best so you will never regret. In that, she has found freedom, no regrets. Only love, only life. So that's it. And please feel free now to comment, to ask questions, whatever. Thank you. Back to you, Gusti. Gusti, I cannot hear you. You're still muted.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay. So thank you for your presentation for your fifth books. So you have resolution to make a book yearly, yeah?
Exactly.
It's already the fifth
Yes.
year, yeah, you've already you write a book. Wow.
Maybe this is my third year because on the first year, I think I launched 2 books. Yeah. So, yeah, the third year.
Okay. Well, I like the part about real strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's simply waking up each day, facing life quietly, and refusing to give up despite the weight in your heart. And I like how you define authenticity by keep surviving, yeah, keep surviving
Exactly.
regardless what we face, because until before you define it like that, I thought big authentic means like unleashing your maximum potential, like, but it is more like having so many achievements. Yeah, I thought it like that, but after you define it this way, I felt like I finally I have like a fresher point of view about being what being authentic means. So, any comments or maybe critics about these book concepts from Mr. Donald and Mbak Pipit?
Unfortunately, I forgot really loud just now. I was in the basement. But I wish Kak Mita good luck with the launch of this book.
Thank you, Pipit. Pipit, are you walking?
Yes, I was at the basement of the mall. Now I'm trying to go outside so to get better signal.
I think you are. You have a better signal now when you're not in the
Okay.
basement. Yeah. I think you can sit
Uh,
down now. Sit down and take a breath.
I'm about to approach the exit. Okay, Gusti, Donald, do you have questions for Kak Mita?
Okay, we will continue after until Mbak Pipit can join us again. So, why the book is titled The Goddess, and who is Fatima here? So it likes it combine fiction and non-fictions.
Okay, good question, Gusti. First, Fatima is the main character in the Goddess. She's a fictional character, a third party, based on stories of several people, including myself. Yeah. So it's a fiction. This book is a fiction. However, the stories are based on people's life.
Oh, fiction. I thought it's non-fiction.
It's a fiction. However, it has poems, it has a workbook, but the story is about Fatima's life.
Okay, so because this is a fiction books, means there is a premise here. Like, what conflict did the Fatima has as the main character in this novel?
Okay. Oh, I never thought about the conflicts and everything like that. Yeah. So because it's a fiction, for me, it was easier to write. I don't have to become more academic or to be serious. I can just create something and make up. Yeah. And the title, The Goddess, is about redefining beauty and power. for Fatima, it's like a struggle that she faces daily being a woman, that she has to work, she has a family, and then on the other hand, she has to go crazy because the world is crazy. If you don't become crazy, you cannot succeed in this world. That's the conflict. However, on the other hand, she understands that her heart cannot lie, and she needs to be loving, she needs to be forgiving, and she needs to be wise as well. So those are the conflicts that Fatima goes through. She's been through the darkness, she's been through the light, and at the end, she said that, hey, I think I learned about life, that you just have to go through life, and even you're surviving, it's a good thing that you're authentic because you want to be consistent on your dreams. You want to be consistent on becoming your true self, your authentic self. But one thing that you have to be brave to love, and you have to do your best in life. Yeah. So, and I've done it all. So now I'm a goddess, and I'm going to continue to becoming a goddess until the end of my life. That's the conclusions you learn, that in life you just need to love and to become the light. Yes. Learning from your mistakes, getting the experiential knowledge, and try not to make the same mistakes. I think that's all.
Hmm,
I'm ready, Gusti.
yeah. Okay.
I'm
Mbak
ready.
Pipit, do
Only,
you have something to ask or to comment
I
maybe?
think it's my time to deliver because we have only 10 minutes left.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Gusti.
Mm. Okay, thank you for your presentation of this novel. I hope this you can complete this book. Yeah, it's already final draft, so you can publish it. And I hope the readers will accept it in positive ways. Okay, Mbak Pipit, now
I
it's your turn.
appreciate it.
Now it's your turn. Mummy Mysteries.
Mummy Mysteries.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, I read Mummy Mysteries last month, but I took a note of the content somewhere, but I could not find it. Got to find it in Google Doc, in my diary, in I don't know, on my way to find it. But last night I read another book. I don't know if you can see. Oh, here it's called The Mysteries of Ancient Egypt. Can you guys see it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
know what's funny is uh my my friend who is a teacher, she moved to a different country and then she gave me her children's book a lot. So Lakota, history of Lakota, Columbus, Egypt, Athens, a lot. So I'm so happy I plan to read all of them because they're very thin but many different topics. So I'm excited. Although this is supposed to be like elementary book, but I actually learned quite a lot from the information. As you can see here, I took a note of all of them, even though I think a lot of the I have heard before, but some of them are pretty interesting. For example, did you know that the story Cinderella was actually originated from Egypt? So it was
Hmm?
taken by a Roman writer and claim it as theirs. Most of it is actually the story of Cinderella, although the name, of course, not Cinderella, originally from ancient Egypt folk tale, right? But then in the year 30 BC, 30 BC, Augustus Caesar attacked Egypt, right, and make Egypt one of the provinces of ancient Rome, one of the provinces of ancient Rome. And that's why the last pharaoh of Egypt actually also around that time, because it was taken over by ancient Rome. So I think I found that very interesting. I've never heard of that before. So I'm gonna look into it further. And then This is a really funny prediction made by archaeologists in the past. So in the hieroglyph writing, right, there are 90 great pyramids. And in this 90 pyramids, there were a lot of hieroglyph writing, right? One of them said that the kingdom was called the Black Kingdom. Okay, the Black Kingdom, aka Kemet. And then the archaeologists thought it was because the color of their skin. For several years, they thought it was because of the color of their skin. Then after searching further, they realized it was actually the color of their soil. So I found that really funny because um, the prediction of the archaeologists, no matter how educated they all can be wrong, and then they're not afraid to admit that they were wrong after they got the information. And I think it was a little bit like casual racism of the past, just because they called the Black Kingdom, automatically they thought it was the color of the skin. Although actually the people in ancient Egypt was not as dark skin color as the rest of Africa, because the approximate the what is it called? The location is really close to Arabian Peninsula and even Europe itself. So it's like a mix between black and white. And I found it another thing that's interesting is how someone who's considered not important became the most famous pharaoh. Pharaoh, right? So can you tell me what one name of pharaoh that you have heard or two?
Tutankhamun.
Usually, if not King Tut, then Ramses. Usually, right? The one featured on movies a lot is Ramses because of how ruthless he was and everything like that. But the other famous pharaoh is actually King Tut, T-H-U-T. And then what's funny is that King Tut was actually considered an unimportant pharaoh. He was only 9 years old when he became a king. He got married at 9 and then he died at 19. That's why, because he was not considered important, his tomb was hidden underneath other pharaohs. So he was buried among 27 other pharaohs in the Great Pyramid. He was put in the bottom, probably even the lowest level of the Great Pyramid. But you know what? Because of the location is so down under, it was the only tomb that was not looted by the robbers. So other tombs were ransacked by the robbers because all of these treasures, gold, silver, all of these things, jewelry, were all gone after thousands of years of uh, uh, looting, right? But then King Tut's tomb was still intact, and then that's how the British expedition found King Tut, King Tut's tomb still intact with all of its jewelry, the mummy, and things like that. So I think it's interesting how during his lifetime he was not considered important at all, even probably the lowest rank among all kings, but now he's one of the most famous. Yeah, I think it kind of reflects about life itself. We never know how it started, and then the end can be totally different. Yeah, or when people were still alive and dead, something like that. I think that's very interesting. Another thing that I found interesting is there are so many things we heard today originated from those times. So maybe you've heard of this riddle of what is the thing that has three legs? Oh, sorry. What are the things that have four legs in the beginning and then two legs after that, three legs? I'm sure you have heard of that riddle before, right?
Human,
The
yeah.
answer is human. It's
Sphinx.
actually this riddle was written in the one of the Great Pyramid, almost 3,000 years ago. So it's just how something as simple as a riddle can pass through the tunnel of time and be passed on from generation to generation. I think it's amazing to me because it's just a riddle. It's not considered that important, but then it get carried away until this day. And then probably the last thing that I would like to share is how the Great Pyramid that time, it was, even during ancient time, it was already fabulous and out of this world because it was one of the first tourist destinations in the world.
Oh,
So yeah, so even during ancient time, the Great Pyramid was already a tourist destination. So they found, it's so funny how human is timeless in the way they carve their name at the step, like Gusti was here. Like the tourists 3,000, 4,000 years ago and now act the same. They want to leave their mark whenever they go to a place they think is interesting or a tourist destination. So they actually, all along the steps of this pyramid, they found many different scribble that is dated for thousands of years. One of them it says Ahmose, son of Itzhak. And then he said, this pyramid looked like as though heaven were in it. Yeah. So this is really good. And last. The last one is probably, oh yeah, there is an inscription in King Tut tomb that says, death will slay with his wings whoever disturbs the peace of Pharaoh. Okay. And you know what? I think this is famously portrayed all over the world that 20 people who were involved in that expedition or in that excavation actually died mysteriously in the same year of the discovery of King Tut tomb, you know. But although ironically the main or the leader of this um, excavation or the archaeologist actually survived for 70 years. But the one who financed it, the one who dug it, the one who became the head of the expedition from the Egyptian side also died mysteriously during the same year, 20 people. So that's what makes, I think, the story even, I don't know, is it like for real? You know, sometimes I feel like it's something like a mix between mm, fact and fiction or something. But this book is based on true story, so I think it's real. Although maybe the one that is questionable is the quote unquote the mysterious way how they die. They can just die out of natural illness, but I think just for drama they call it mysterious. Okay, so I think that's what I can share about this book. I find it entertaining, and what I like best is about the Cinderella cultural appropriation. But yeah, we never heard about it before. I had to confirm. And then the King Tut, how he was considered unimportant, but now it's probably the most important of all of other pharaohs and the most well preserved. I think that is it. Okay, thank you. Any
okay.
questions?
Okay, thank you, Mbak Pipit, for your hilarious presentation. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Cinderella is from Egypt, so there is no glacius, yeah, because it's from Egypt, yeah. Oh, so like does Egypt has fairy,
Mary,
yeah?
they do have a lot of magical animals. Animals they think as magic, like cats. You know how cats were mummified in Egypt, right?
Bastet, yeah.
The what? Sorry.
Bastet, the cat goddess.
Yeah, the cats, and then they have ram, they have baboon and bull were considered sacred. They don't have fairies. But there are a lot of stories about how the pharaohs were the son of the sun god, and how, yeah, it's debatable, but they said a lot of stories we heard today is actually inspired by ancient Egypt.
Oh, I
This
see.
is some modification.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Mr. Donald and Mbak Mita, do you have something to ask or comment?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Pipit, for the presentation. What makes the ancient Egypt so advanced, the civilization for its time?
Yes, actually, that's the first page of the book, how it was one of the first great civilizations, right? Um, the book doesn't say it, but I have my theory. So if you care to listen to my theory, well, we know, I don't know, there's this established archaeological belief that the first human came out of Africa, right? The Lishi bone around, actually that's around Ethiopia, around that area, right? So I think because the first humans actually emerged from Africa, the first great civilization gotta be from around the area as well. But then the temperature wise, the southern part of Africa, I think is too hot to be able to, it's not it's not edible. It's not difficult to grow agriculture. So it's difficult for them to kind of develop. But then Egypt is somehow is the mix between Mediterranean, the Red Sea is kind of it's a perfect combination of climate, the soil fertility, the Nile River, of course. Nile River is not going to be very fertile. So I think the climate and the geography of the area is like the perfect combination for the great civilization to actually emerge. And then the location is fairly close to where the first humans emerged at the time. So that was my theory.
Okay, thank you.
I think we need to go, guys. Can we take a photo? But I will put my photo with me holding a book. I will insert my photo.
One more question, Pipit.
But Insta cannot photo, ya?
I don't know how. I don't know how. How?
Oh, Donald, can you please do it?
Yes, I can do it, but I need both hands, so I cannot hold my own book. Okay, but I can do it.
Yeah, you can edit yours in like me. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Mamita, will you? Okay. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
When do we meet next month?
Second Saturday.
Saturday?
Yeah, second Saturday
All
should
right, then.
be
Okay, guys.
August 8th.
Thank
August
you.
8th. August 8th.
August 8th?
Yeah.
See you August 8th. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gusti. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mamita. Thank you, Pipi.
Everybody, bye. Have a nice weekend.